Overnight, we saw 11 new locally acquired cases. All 11 were linked to known outbreaks.
But 2 of those 11 cases were reported yesterday, bringing the actual new number down to 9. And none of those were mystery cases.
I can confirm that over the last few days, over the weekend, we've closed over 1,000 primary close contacts across these combined outbreaks.
But officials are still no closer to identifying the origin of the Delta strain outbreak, which grew by 4 overnight, with new questions over whether it could have seeded from diplomats with quarantine exemptions.
We simply don't know. Wouldn't rule anything in, wouldn't rule anything out.
Do you get data on how many diplomats are in Victoria, come to Victoria and are exempt from hotel quarantine?
Yeah, we do. We have that data.
Are you able to elaborate on that at all?
Probably be in the tens, if that, over, since beginning of April in Victoria.
Meanwhile, there was still no word on whether lockdown would be extended or lifted, with the state pushing back on this call from the PM.
I am hopeful that these restrictions in Victoria will be lifted as soon as possible. When similar circumstances were faced here in New South Wales, the restrictions were contained.
No one's handled similar outbreaks. I don't want to say that it is some order of magnitude more dangerous, but 75% of people within households becoming positive when there's a case there is a challenge.
So today, the numbers look okay, as all Melburnians eye Thursday's looming lockdown deadline.
It's frustrating. People want to know what will things look like 3 days from now, but we see different changes every day, and we just need to see that play out.
Professor Nancy Baxter is head of the Melbourne School of Population and Global Health, and she joins us now. Nancy, there were a couple of wild hours there in the morning when people saw that number 11 and we didn't have the full story. What was your reaction?
I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. For anyone who was in Melbourne last year, I think a lot of us were having flashbacks to over 100 days in lockdown. Now, the numbers aren't anything like they were back then, but it's hard not to be thinking that, we're going to be in lockdown longer when you see a number like that. Turns out what's really important is the cases behind the number, the stories behind the numbers, and those stories weren't bad. So it was a relief once they had the press conference and confirmed that, almost everyone had already been in isolation.
We still don't know the origin of the Delta outbreak. Does that have you concerned?
It has me really concerned. It's one of the most concerning things about this outbreak. I mean, the rest of it is explainable. And I think we have to be prepared in the future to, if there's an outbreak from hotel quarantine, to be willing to go into lockdowns if we need to. But the fact that we can't even figure out who had the virus, this Delta variant in the first place, that really frightens me. It means that somehow we can't even track back to see where these people got it from. And it just makes me concerned about how infectious this variant is and how easy it's going to be for it to leak out of quarantine.
I mean, are we kind of lucky in a way that Melbourne was already in lockdown when this Delta variant arrived out of nowhere?
Well, that is the silver lining, because this could have spread pretty far before it was recognized. But because everyone is aware of the need to test, because people got into quarantine already, even before the variant had been found, it meant we were all protected. It's not going to travel as far. It's not going to spread as far because we're all staying in our home. We're not socializing and getting together. So in some ways it was lucky. Like, I wouldn't call a lockdown lucky, but in some ways it was lucky because I think it's really allowed us to contain this Delta variant and make it so that we can get out of lockdown sometime soon.
So, Professor, I know it's hard, but what's your call? Should parents be getting the lunchboxes out and the school uniforms? Are we going back to school on Friday?
Well, I think a lot depends on the numbers. They're going to wait to make the call. And so I think a lot's going to depend on the numbers tomorrow and Wednesday, as well as the story behind the numbers. Remember, if everyone's already in quarantine, it means the community's not at risk. It's not good for those people, and it's not good for those families, because what we've seen is once one person in the family gets it, almost everyone gets it. So it's not good, but at least the rest of the community is protected. But I have a feeling that we will be able to come out of lockdown it'll be a staged lockdown, so we'll only be able to be allowed to do some things, but I think they're going to prioritize schools. But I have a feeling they're not going to bring kids back till Tuesday, till after the holiday.
Professor, your name, Nancy Baxter, sounds a lot like anti-vaxxer. Has that been an issue for you at all in your field of expertise?
That's the first time anyone's ever told me that. That is hilarious. No, it hasn't been an issue for me. think people know my stance on vaccination.
It might be an issue now that Peter's brought it up.
Well, the school we can clear it up, but you're very clear on where you stand, Nancy.
I think you just started a new pandemic.
Yeah.
What was that for?
Thanks, Pete.
Poor Nancy. I apologise for what Pete just did there, Nancy.
In biblical times, that's your problem.
Nancy, thank you so much for lending us your expertise tonight.
All right, bye now.
Well, I think for Victorians this morning, when that number 11 came out, we wanted to know, were they close contacts and who exactly were they? So Dr. Brett Sutton has said today, from now on, if possible, if he's got all of the data, they'll attach it to that number.
It's so
you'll
important.
know.
From expert opinions to in-depth analysis and reporting, the Project YouTube brings you the biggest stories from Australia and around the globe. Hit the subscribe button now for news delivered straight to your feed.